Hey guys, this is Jeff Stanek with Figured Out Baseball. We've got a really good Figured Out Baseball podcast today. We're lucky enough to be joined by Brooks Repking. He is the associate head coach and recruiting coordinator at Crown College, a Division III school in St. Bonifacius, Minnesota. Brooks, I think, is a really interesting guy and someone who's got a lot of energy as a young coach, and I think he's going to be a fast mover as a young coach as well. So I'm excited to have him on the program. I'll give you a quick background on Coach Repking before we jump into questions with him. Today's podcast is brought to you by Crossover Symmetry and ArmCare.com. Coach Repking is from Hamburg, Wisconsin. He played collegiately at Lakeland University first, where he spent 2 seasons. That's a Division III school in Plymouth, Wisconsin. He then transferred to Crown College, where he graduated in 2019. In his 2 seasons at Crown College, he started every game that every game that the team played. He has since had his number retired at Crown College for his leadership on and off the field. He was hired at Crown College as a coach for the spring of 2020 to work with the hitters and infielders. Of course, the 2020 season was cut short. 2021, on the other hand, the team performed very, very well. They broke 37 school records in 2021. They finished with the best program record in school history and also the best conference finish in school history. They finished 11-5 overall in the conference. The offense finished top 25 in the country in home runs and stolen bases. They hit 48 home runs in 41 games. Also stole 91 bases in 41 games. They're, again, top 25 in the country in both of those categories. They were one of only 3 teams in the country to be in the top 25 in both of those categories. In 2021, Coach Repking coached the Conference Player of the Year. It was the first Conference Player of the Year in program history. He also coached the Conference Rookie of the Year, 3 All-Region selections, and he was busy getting his master's degree in 2021. He finished his master's degree last year in organizational leadership. He has been elevated for the 2022 season to the title of associate head coach. Brooks, I'm really excited to have you on a podcast today, man. I just want to thank you for being here.
I appreciate you having me on any day to talk baseball. It's a great day.
So I like to start with something usually from the bio that stands out. And for you, I think there's a lot of things that stand out just about the last couple of years, the couple of years that you've been at Crown so far. But 2021, obviously you guys had a really, really good season for program standards and any other standards. A really good season overall. Was that... how much of that was because of guys that were able to come back maybe for next year because of COVID, or transfers that you had coming in, or some new things that you and the other coaches were able to implement? Can you just talk a little bit about what exactly happened in 2021 to sort of kickstart the program and help you guys have such a good, productive season?
For sure, yeah. I'd say, in any college program, or any athletic program, especially at the college level, you win with older guys, right? And so, we're very fortunate to have a, kind of senior-laden team. Last year in the COVID years, we'll have a very senior-laden team, kind of this coming year. But it was really a culmination of guys that we had brought in, 2-3 years prior, or guys that had transferred in as a senior last year, kind of coming together. So our head coach, Coach Tahani, he was hired 5 years ago. I was his first recruit. I came in as a junior, played under him, and when he kind of took over the program, we were about as low as low. When I first showed up on campus, we had like 15 guys on the team, and we went like 6-25. But he made a lot of big changes, brought in a lot of talented dudes, and our second year we made the conference tournament for the first time and finished like 8-8 in conference, and a little bit under 500, kind of overall season, and then I graduated and kind of saw the trajectory of the program, where we were going, and jumped back on board as a coach, and thought we were going to have a really good year in 2020, and obviously, like everybody else, had the COVID year, which was tough on everybody, but our kind of core group of guys really stuck with it, and all of a sudden it kind of culminated in a big 2021 where, we knew we had a lot of talented dudes, we knew we had a lot of pieces, but guys kind of just put it together, in 2021. Seth, our conference player of the year, had a good sophomore year in 2019, but not unbelievable. And then he had 2 years of development, and all of a sudden had, a first-team all-region, season. And our right fielder, Kyle, he had never hit a home run in high school, never hit a home run in his first 2 years of college. together and had 17 home runs and, was top 10 in the country in home runs. And so a lot of it was just a lot of pieces kind of falling into place. It wasn't, like all of a sudden, boom, we had a bunch of guys come in and it changed the program. It was, 3 or 4 years of pounding away at guys really developing and, kind of culminated a big 2021. And we're hoping even bigger 2022.
The home run spike is something that I'm really interested in because I think that's something everybody would like to achieve. Even guys that consider themselves or teams that consider themselves, high average hitters first. Everybody likes home runs. It's just a matter of whether teams kind of sell out for home runs or they also want to hit for a high average with home runs. But the home run spike is something that I'm really interested in as a coach. And I think other guys are too. Brooks, just in your short time as a coach, and even maybe what you experienced as a player, do home run spikes for teams come because of a change in philosophy, a change in approach, a change in the weight room, or different personnel that maybe sometimes you kind of put a group of guys together that's just kind of their style of game. But it sounds like with that one player especially that it was the same guy, just something happened, something clicked. So can you kind of talk about that a little bit, and whether it's a team home run spike or individual home run spike, just maybe some things some ingredients to making that happen?
For sure. I mean, I'd say the simple answer is it's a combination of all those things, right? I mean, it's not just, this guy really started swinging for the fences, this guy launch angle, this, that, the other. I think it's a lot of combinations of things. One, again, we had an older team last year, and so, older team, that kind of helps. And I think, when we got guys that come in as freshmen, like you said, everybody likes to hit the home run. Every freshman that comes in that the hitter wants to hit home runs at the college level. The most special time in a hitter's career at the college level is when he probably hits that first home run. But again, you develop power with age. And so, Kyle, again, came in, he had a really good swing as a freshman, but all of a sudden, you go through 3 years of a strength and conditioning program at the college level. I mean, he's a different dude. I mean, he's grown into his man muscles a little bit as a junior, senior in college. I mean, he looks like a totally different guy than he was as a freshman. And so I think that's a big part of it. And I think it's just the personnel that you have. I mean, every recruit that we have on campus, since last year when we hit 48 home runs, they ask the same questions. Are you guys teaching launch angle? How are you guys hitting so many home runs? And I think it's just a personnel of who we've had. We've had some really special hitters, and we've just had some guys that can hit home runs. We've got a guy that he's lucky if he hits a double, but you can pretty much pencil him in for 350 every year, and he's never going to hit a home run probably. And so I think it's really just who you have. We've had some home run hitters, but I would say overall it's just age. Power comes with age. As a freshman, I want to recruit a guy that is a good hitter, that can hit doubles, can hit line drives, and then the power is going to come. Too many guys, I think, right now, as a 17, 18-year-old, want to be the power guy, want to be the guy that's always hitting home runs and change their swing to hit home runs when they don't realize, hey, if I'm just a really good hitter and I go through the strength and conditioning process, power is going to come. Power is going to come when I turn 20, 21, 22. And so I think a lot of guys, don't really realize that. And again, I think when we bring freshmen into our program, it's realizing, hey, we want you to be a good hitter. I want you to be a line drive hitter. Because power is going to come. Once you're in the weight room for 2-3 years, it's going to pile on. I mean, it's just a symptom of it. Last year we had a freshman that hit 7 home runs, and I think that's pretty rare overall. Usually when you see those guys with the high home run totals, it's older guys that have gone through the strength conditioning process and really taken the strength conditioning process incredibly serious. I think our strength conditioning program is great, and I think we run a very successful one. But it's at the end of the day, it's the guys that take it very, very seriously that see that kind of progression. I mean, I can give you the best strength conditioning program in the world, but if you're not the hardest working dude in the room, you're not working incredibly hard at it, it's not going to matter. And so I think it comes with age and the weight room, I would say, is the two biggest things.
So you mentioned one of your players in the team who is going to hit for high average. If he hits a couple of doubles throughout the season, you'll be really happy with that. And another misconception I think that people have is that there's no room for that type of guy in college anymore, a guy that doesn't produce a ton of extra base hits. Brooks, for you, I know you're the recruiting coordinator there as well. And again, I know you've only got a couple of years of experience, and I think sometimes just kind of trial and error. Recruiting philosophies change over time. But for you, with what you've learned, what you've seen so far, what does a player have to look like as the full package, total player, offense, defense, character-wise, for you to recruit a guy who you feel like has a chance to hit for a pretty good average, but doesn't have any present power, extra base hit power to his game? Like, what does that guy need to look like for you to give him an opportunity? And I'm asking that because I think it's important for people to hear that answer and to know whether or not there's still a place in college baseball for guys who can hit for a high average, but just they're not power guys. It's not a part of their game, at least presently.
Yeah, I would say, for us, it's, guys and recruits come in all shapes and forms, right? I mean, so we've got the Kyle, who's a 17 home run, 6'4", looks like a Division I linebacker in right field. But we also got a guy that, like I said, who hit 350 and, he strikes out twice in 110 plate appearances. And so for us, it's, I'm looking for a tool. As a recruiting guy, as a recruiting coordinator, I'm looking for a tool. I mean, if a guy can hit, there's 1,000 different ways to win a baseball game. I can win just as many games with 350 hitters that never hit a home run as I do with 300 hitters that hit 10, 15 home runs. So you can. There's not one specific way to win a baseball game, and so I think for us it's finding the most talented guys we can, regardless of that tool, and bringing them in and seeing how those pieces kind of fit together. I think Coach Sahani and I have really developed the philosophy of, we're not looking for, hey, just power hitters. We're not looking for just power arms. We're not, we're looking for guys with a tool, a really good tool that we can come in and we can bring them in and we can develop that second and third tool. And all of a sudden now they're, an all conference player, all region player. For us at a small Division III school, I'm not getting the guy that is a 5-tool player, runs incredibly fast, got the amazing arm out in the outfield, hits for power, a great fielder. I'm getting a guy that, is a super, line drive hitter. He can really hit, but maybe he's a step slow. And now all of a sudden I'm going to bring him in and I'm going to develop those things. And so there's definitely a spot in college baseball for, a guy that doesn't just hit for power, a guy that is, just more of a contact guy. And same with, pitchers out there that, don't throw, 85 plus. There's we've got our closer right now penciled in for this year, is a sidearm guy who throws, if he throws 72, if he hits 72, it's a good day for him. But he gets outs, man. He gets outs. And so that's the process for us. We're in the business of winning games. I'm not in the business of, hitting home runs. If you tell me this year we're not going to hit, any home runs, but we're going to win more games than last year, I'm all for it. So for us, it's really just looking for guys that have a tool that we can bring in and we can develop. And then obviously you talk about the off the field, kind of character parts of it. That's huge for us too. We're, again, small Division III school in Minnesota. We've really built a culture in the last 3-4 years of winning, of success, of excellence. And so you got to bring in guys that can do the same thing. You can't bring in a guy that's incredibly talented, is going to be the dude, but all of a sudden he's going to destroy your culture, right? You can't sacrifice a spot on a roster for a guy that is incredibly talented, but is going to compromise where you're at. And so I think for us, that's the number one thing we look for. What that dude is like, when he's not playing, the character he has, the work ethic he has. I don't care how good a guy is. If he doesn't have high, work ethic, we don't want him. And then does this guy have a tool that can help us? Whether it's the hit tool, whether it's speed, whether it's a good arm, whatever it is, can he help us? And that comes in a lot of shapes and forms. You can have a 5'8" guy, with no muscle mass on him, and he can help you win a baseball game. And you can have a 6'4" guy who's built like a tank, and he can help you win baseball games. And so I think that's what it looks like for us. We don't want to pigeonhole ourselves into, hey, this guy's got to hit this metric, or we're not recruiting him, because that's how you lose out on a guy that's incredibly talented.
So you just mentioned metrics there, and I'd like to bring that up with recruiting. For you guys, are you still, not that you don't have access to metrics, because even the recruiting scouting organizations that are out there, they provide it even if you don't have it. But I think you can see metrics on most guys, pitchers and hitters. But how much are you guys still relying on the eye test as far as just, with what you just said, Brooks, just how much are you guys still going out and seeing games and just looking at a guy and saying the way that he plays the game and the tools that he has, I think he can help us when I think he's a guy for us, and just in relying on your eyes when you're out scouting and whether or not a guy fits into your program as opposed to recruiting metrics, meaning, you're going to jump online onto a database and look to see who the highest velocity guys are that are still unsigned and go after them without ever seeing them, as opposed to going out and seeing guys that maybe they don't have the best velocity available in their class at this point, but they've got what you might term as pitchability, or they've got a couple of pitches that you maybe a 2 to 3 pitch mix that you feel like can get outs at your level regardless of what the radar gun says. How much are you still using your eyes as a scout to as a recruiter to decide which guys fit in your program?
Yeah, I'd say we rely on it a lot. I think our first couple of years of the program, you can have a guy that really can look great in BP and he's got the high exit velo, but that guy can't hit it again. He's a 4 o'clock hitter. He can hit in the BP rounds at 4, but he can't hit in the when the bright lights are on at 7. And so I think for us, especially when you get in this world of showcases and all the different platforms that are out there, which a lot of cases are great. Gets a lot of kids exposure. Kids get seen. I recognize that part of it, but watching a kid's exit velocity, on a round of BP that's getting floated in there, it's very different than hitting an 88 mile per hour fastball on the black, the opposite way. And so for us, and for me, I rely on it a lot. The metrics are great. And obviously, if a kid's throwing 94 off the mound, that talks. I mean, you're not going to turn a kid away that does that. But you got to rely on your arm, especially with your eyes, with how competitive kind of recruiting is nowadays. If you I think a lot of coaches have fallen into the trap of, hey, I'm going to only look at exit velocity. I'm only going to look at velocity off the mound. Hey, I'm only going to look at this metric, that metric, when again, it can deceive you. You can have a guy that looks really good in a showcase, but he's not a winning baseball player. He's not a guy that's going to come in and help you win games. And so, I think you have to differentiate, the two. Obviously, there's pluses and minuses of both. You can go watch a kid, and he can go 3 for 3 and look great, and that's his one great day in a season. So I get that too. But I think you really have to rely on your eyes. And as great as metrics are, you can't let that be the sole focus of everything you're looking at and the only way you're recruiting, because I think you're going to fall into a trap of bringing in a lot of great guys that, hey, they look really good in the bullpen, but that dude can't get outs. When the push comes to shove, that dude can't get outs. Or a guy looks really great, you can see him looks, first team all conference in BP before the game, but then you can't hit and you never score any runs in a game. And so I think it's changing that. And I think we've even seen when we bring in our freshmen where, guys, again, are, come in and, they take their first rounds of BP on campus and they've got kind of the showcase, mindset instead of, hey, we're looking to go opposite, right center gap here, and kind of those sort of things. And so I think for us, it's huge. You've got to rely on your eyes, because your eyes don't lie. Metric is so silly as it sounds. A metric can lie to you a little bit as far as it not being absolutely game-like all the time.
I 100% agree with that. I think it's a really mature approach that you've got to looking at players, because I've been on the other side of things as a young recruiting coordinator and trying to get the most talented guys that I could on the roster and thinking that we could develop the other things, thinking that, you can't, you bring in a bunch of arms that throw really, really hard and that are big body guys and you can teach them the other stuff, or, or like they'll be around your culture, your team culture, so they will sort of adapt and pick up the work ethic of these other guys and sort of what your expectations are for the team. And I'll tell you that I've recruited a lot of very, very, very talented players on paper who didn't really help us nearly as much as you thought they would or they should have. Whereas on the other hand, I've recruited a lot of guys who weren't that flashy players and were never going to get a chance to, never got a look at pro ball or anything like that. And they were some of the most productive guys that helped us win a lot of games at some of the stops that I was. So it's a funny world, the recruiting world. And I think that what you guys are doing, I think is going to produce a lot of wins in your time there for sure. Now, Brooks, you mentioned launch angle, several minutes ago in the conversation. And I'm curious about that just because it's such a hot button topic. And launch angle obviously is just the measurement of the ball coming off the bat. A ground ball has a launch angle just like a fly ball has a launch angle. So just because a coach talks about launch angle doesn't mean you're teaching guys to hit the ball quote unquote in the air or hit fly balls or anything else. But I'm curious if that's something that you have conversations with your players about. Do you talk to your players about launch angle? And whether it's good or bad, either saying like, hey, your launch angle's too low, you're hitting too many balls on the ground. Hey, your launch angle's too high, you're hitting too many balls in the air, where you can give them something measurable to look at. Or is that not even something that you really that you discuss with your players, your hitters?
Yeah, I'd say for us, it's something you can't avoid, right? Like you said, it's a hot button issue. For 17 to 25-year-olds, it's the cool thing, right? And, especially when you got a guy that's hitting 17 home runs, you got other guys on the bench that, they want to do that same thing. And so launch angle inevitably comes up. And so I think it's something that we definitely discuss, but it's not something we preach. I think for us, it's, one of those things that we just, when guys start talking about it, it's one of those things that we kind of try to talk them, not necessarily off the ledge, but again, it's, we preach gap to gap, we preach line drives. The easiest, kind of play in the game is a pop-up and a ground ball. And so, like you said, if a guy is really, chopping wood and he's only hitting ground balls, maybe that launch angle conversation is going to come up a little bit, not to, create incredible loft, but just to not, hit 90% ground balls. And then the other part that it does come up for us is, again, you bring in these 17, 18-year-old dudes that were the guy in high school, and all of a sudden they get to the college game, and they're 4 years of development behind, some of these 4th, 5th, 6th-year seniors, and they want to create loft, and they want to hit home runs in BP, and all of a sudden now they're popping up to third in BP, and they're, hitting lazy fly balls to center and left field in BP. Now all of a sudden it's a conversation we have to have where, hey, we're looking for line drives. And again, anybody can, I haven't played college baseball in 4 years. I could probably hit a home run in BP if I'm really just looking pull. And so, that's the conversation for us where it's definitely not something we preach. It's something I think you have to talk about, broadly, and then it's, more case-by-case situations. Where, again, we've got a freshman that has come in this year. He's 6'4", built like an ox, is going to be a big home run hitter in his career here. But you want him to turn into a good hitter first before he's a home run hitter. You don't want him to be a one-dimensional hitter where he's going 1 for 4 with a home run and 3 strikeouts or a home run and 3 pop-ups. And so I think that's the discussion for us, where we want guys to be good hitters first, line drive hitters, double hitters, and then the home runs are going to come. And so I think that's where the discussion comes for us. Like you said, it's such a hot button topic that these guys love to talk about it. I can tell you right now that the 20-some hitters we've got, they all love to talk about it. They would talk about it all day with me if they could. And so I think it's, talking guys a little bit away from it, but also acknowledging, hey, these guys are all about it. And so you kind of got to mix in some of their lingo and talk to them a little bit about it.
It's really interesting. And I'm sure the discussions you have with players are pretty interesting as well. How often, Brooks, do you find that you've got to sort of readjust the focus of guys, especially just for an example, a guy comes on campus and maybe hasn't just had a really good weight program before, or maybe just hasn't lifted much at all until he gets with you guys, and through his weight program throughout the year, he puts on 10 or 15 pounds of muscle. And, looking at himself in the mirror, he feels different. He looks different, and he knows he's a lot stronger. And then maybe he, in his mind, he's like, man, I can probably start hitting for some power now because I've put on a good bit of weight. I've added a lot of strength. And then, that guy maybe changes his approach. How often as a coach do you feel like you are having to readjust the sights of players and sort of, like in my mind, I'm picturing, you have a target with a bullseye in the middle, and the players just kind of want to keep floating away from that bullseye as they for whatever reason they develop a bad habit or their approach changes without necessarily meaning to, but maybe because of a couple things happening, either results or like, a strength gain, a noticeable strength gain, and they start to kind of get away from who they are. And as a coach, you've got to like pull them back into the center of that target, which is where they're going to be the most successful player. How often do you have to have that conversation with guys as they go through this, physical changes and development, or maybe see some home runs? A guy that maybe has, been with the program for a couple years and is a really solid line drive hitter, just a good fundamental hitter. All of a sudden, starts hitting a couple balls over the wall, and then that he gets kind of hungry for that and starts kind of changing things, or maybe he gets too pull happy because of those couple of home runs or whatever. I just kind of curious about how much of your job is to recenter guys, for lack of a better term, to bring guys back to kind of who they are, remind them who they are and how they're going to have the most success, and keep them from sort of drifting and changing their approach and getting away from where they're going to be the most successful player.
Yeah, I'd say it's a huge part of my job as hitting coach, and I would say it really just depends, player to player, and obviously, being a college baseball coach, I mean, relationships is 95% of our job, and so I think it really just depends on, one, on the guy, and two, on the relationship you have with that guy. I really think results don't lie, right? I mean, if a guy's getting into a game and he's not seeing results and his approach is changing, it's pretty easy to bring that up with a guy. And if the results are showing, then I think you're, kind of in a little bit of a better spot. And so, I think for us, it's really just, who you are and set the conference player of the year. I played with him for a year, and now I've coached with him. This will be my third year coaching him. And so those conversations look different, right? I mean, I can give him, one second sentence kind of cue of, and he knows what I'm talking about, and he can readjust. You get some of those young guys that's, maybe pounding away for a week straight every single day. Hey, you got to adjust, and for them to actually figure it out. And so I think it's really hitter to hitter, a more polished guy that, it's got, Kyler Redfielder's got 500 college at-bats under his belt or whatever it is. It's a little bit easier to kind of approach those conversations. He can grasp, kind of things a little bit better. He knows how pitchers are trying to approach him. He knows what his, approach should be. And so, all hitters get out of their approach, get out of, feeling great at times. And so I really think for us, it's having conversations early on. When a guy, like you said, a guy gets on campus early on, knowing what his approach is, knowing where he is. And then for us, having, weights and gains in the weight room shouldn't really have a huge effect on it, because our approach should still be fairly similar. A guy that's 6'4" and built, sure, maybe he's got a little bit more of a pull approach. But again, we still want good hitters. You still want line drive hitters. That doesn't change just because a guy can hit a line drive 415 feet compared to 360 feet. Their approach should be, somewhat the same. And so I think it's for us just realizing the relationships you have with the guys in the room, and then seeing when they're a little bit off kilter. Once you get a guy, a freshman, through fall ball, through kind of live sets, and now all of a sudden you're getting ready for a game, you've got a pretty good idea what that kid's approach is, what he's looking for, what he looks like when he's going really well, what he looks like when he's not going well. And so I think it's just, approaching some of those guys and knowing what guys react to what. Some guys, if they have a bad day in live sets, the last thing they need mentally is for you to come up and say something to them, because they know what they're doing wrong. And some guys, when they're doing bad, they have no idea what they're doing wrong. And you need to go out there and talk with them about their approach and see where they're at. And so I think it's really just knowing the guy first and foremost. And then once you have older guys, those conversations, not only become easier, but they become quicker, and the learning curve becomes, far less. Maybe it's only 5 at-bats where where they're in that little bit of a funk, or where they're in that super pull approach, and they get back to where they need to be, where, you have a young guy that's never faced college pitching, in a game setting, they get into a game, all of a sudden maybe that's 20, 25 at-bats, or it takes for that approach to really flip. So I think it's, really case by case and relationship by relationship.
I want to ask you just about the offensive approach as a whole with the team. You guys hit a bunch of home runs. You steal a bunch of bases. Is that by design, or is that based on personnel? And I kind of ask that, meaning, like, stolen bases especially. Do you Are you going to be a team that steals a ton of bases every year, regardless of who's on your team, because it's something you work on and it's a skill that you want to develop? Or did that happen because you just happened to have a bunch of guys who could really, really run last year?
Yeah, I think for us, you have to play aggressive. And so I remember our head coach in one of our coaching meetings joking that we had before we played a game last year that we had one of the slowest teams in the country, which I agreed at the time. I really thought we had probably one of the slower teams in the country, and we still stole 90-some bases. And so I think for us, it's just an aggression thing. It's the same with as a hitter. If you see one of our guys go up to the plate and watch a fastball down the middle on an 0 count, we're going to be pretty upset. It just doesn't happen very often. We're a very aggressive team, and that's just kind of the mindset we put our guys into, but in a smart capacity, right? And so the stolen base things is more of us just believing in our guys, believing in counts. It's something that we really pound away at. We practice, base running a ton. We're going to practice base running this year even more than we ever have, because we do have a few more faster guys on this team than we did last year in 21. And so I really think it's just what we pound away at. It's just a mindset that we have. Our catcher last year, who, and he'll admit this, to anybody, I mean, he's one of the slowest guys, ever. Just about anybody, my mom probably beat him in a foot race. I mean, I think he was like 6 for 6 on stolen bases. So I think it's really just a mindset and kind of what we preach to the guys.
You talked a few minutes ago, Brooks, about one of the guys who's on your team. You played with him for a year. Now this will be your third year coaching him. How difficult was it for you to move into a coaching role with guys that you played next to? What was that like? What are some of the challenges that you faced there? Trying to coach up guys that you were a player with last year, because there's a different relationship, player to player as opposed to player to coach. Even if you want to be a quote unquote player's coach and have good relationships with the guys, there's still a little bit of a different line that you need to draw. What were some of the challenges that you faced there, going from peer to coach with a lot of the guys on the team?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a challenge. I think one thing that helped me, that is, I transferred into Crown as an upperclassman, and so I was kind of seen as, one of the leaders on the team early on, even when we weren't, as great. And then, I was a captain as a senior, and then went from senior captain, first baseman, to, assistant coach the next year. And so, had probably 8 or 9 guys that I had played with, and all of a sudden, boom, now I'm your assistant coach. And so that was definitely a challenge, but I think one of those things where, it's if you carry yourself every day, with that kind of leadership mindset, I don't think there was that big of a transition, really, because, I mean, they had known me, they had seen me as a leader, and now all of a sudden, I'm an assistant coach. And so, definitely a challenge, and definitely one that, I know a lot of guys, face. But I think it's one of those things that if you carry yourself every single day, as that leader, you're leading by example every single day, there really shouldn't be that much of a change. Sure, you're going to have a little bit closer, a little bit more intimate relationship with some of those guys, just because you had played with them. You're in the apartment, with them, after games late, and then all of a sudden, boom, the next year you're an assistant coach for them. But I think it's really one of those things. If you carry yourself, in a certain way, as a player, that transition isn't huge. I think for some of my teammates, that would have been a pretty big transition, and a much harder transition for them to go from player to coach. But then it also was very easy with just a lot of the guys we had. Seth, the guy I referenced, I mean, he was one of the greatest leaders that I've ever been around, and we're fortunate enough to have him back as fifth year guy. And so when you've got upperclassmen leaders that all of a sudden had boom treated me, as a coach from day one, everything kind of just tunneled down from there. So, very fortunate, but something that, definitely had to face.
Yeah, I think that having upperclassmen who the other guys on the team respect, they'll follow their lead a lot. And if you have a guy, like you said, that treats you like a coach and gives you the respect that a coach should get, then that helps a lot with the other guys to kind of get on board with that as well. I'd like to transition, Brooks, and talk about recruiting with you a little bit. And I'd like to just ask with a question that I saw on Twitter a couple of days ago for another podcast that I recorded. A question came in after I had recorded, but I think it's a relevant question to you as well. But I had someone, sometimes I'll post on Twitter that I'm recording a podcast, see if anybody has any questions. So this is one of the ones that came in. I'd like to, one person asked if you as a college recruiting coordinator still go out and watch high school games, or if all of your recruiting is done during travel ball season. Like how, and you're in Minnesota, maybe it's different up there than it is elsewhere, but at least in your area, how much are you going out to watch high school baseball compared to waiting until summer and fall travel baseball season to scout?
Yeah, I'd say it's a good mixture. We watch a ton of high school games. I watch a ton of Legion games. I watch a ton of travel ball games. And so with baseball, college baseball being in the spring, obviously it's a little bit harder with Minnesota high school baseball being in the spring also. Maybe get out as many high school games as we want, but we definitely still go to high school games. And so, I really think you're seeing kind of this, exodus from, high school ball, Legion ball into travel ball, and that's great, right? I mean, but at some point too, you still have to. I grew up playing high school ball. I played Legion ball. Played very little travel ball, and I think there's still a lot to be said for high school baseball, a lot to be said for Legion baseball, and so we see a ton of high school games. We see a ton of Legion games, and then the travel ball thing too. Is obviously it's easier to get to some of those travel ball games, in July compared to April and May when we're playing games gearing up for a conference tournament. But we still go to a lot of high school games. I think there's something to really be said for watching a kid play high school ball compared to travel baseball. You can see how a guy is with guys that he's kind of grown up with, guys that he really knows. I mean, travel baseball in a lot of cases, sure those are some of your close friends, but you don't have the relationship with some of those travel ball guys that you do with say high school teammates and teammates like you're going to have in college. You're going to have even closer and more intimate relationships at the college level than you do at the high school level, and high school level compared to travel ball and AAU. So seeing guys play travel ball is great, but it's also in my eyes a little bit more of a selfish environment. Guys are a little bit trying to get theirs a little bit more, where high school ball is about winning, right? And so that's really where we like to see guys play is high school baseball. And then if the only time you can see him play travel baseball is in the summer, then great. I want to watch a kid play, but I really think there's something to be said to watch a kid play for his high school, play with guys that he's really close with, because that's kind of him and his true self. That's him and how he's going to act when he's at your program. Where travel baseball, he doesn't really know those guys maybe as well as some of those high school guys. It's just a little bit different of a feel in a different environment.
Today's podcast is brought to you by Crossover Symmetry and ArmCare.com. If you want to build cannon arms that stay in top condition all year, check out ArmCare.com. Developed by Crossover Symmetry, ArmCare.com measures players' arm strength and range of motion and delivers customized prep, strength, and recovery training based on each player's wellness scores, strength needs, throwing workloads, and fatigue. It gives you the tools to keep your players at their peak all season. So check out the team packages on armcare.com and gain a competitive advantage in player development. Your players will be healthier, throw harder, and win when it counts. Crossover Symmetry and armcare.com. Brooks, I think the recruiting side of things is really interesting to me as a former recruiting coordinator. I like talking about those things, and I agree that I think it's easier to see guys maybe in travel season, but I think that you see a more pure form of the game, especially if you're a guy that wants to recruit winners. I think you're going to see guys that want to win more in high school than you do in travel ball, where it's a little more of a kind of a show and go atmosphere. Like you said, they're trying to just get theirs. They're trying to get their reps in on the mound. There are guys that are just trying to kind of get their innings. They have 2 or 3 innings they're going to throw in the rest of the game. They're not as locked into it as they would be a high school game. And I think there's really something there for sure. Do you feel like you need to see guys in both environments? I guess if you see a guy, maybe there's not enough time for this sometimes in the recruiting process, but if you see a guy in travel ball that you kind of like, do you feel like you need to see him in his high school environment to really get a good feel for who he is, or do you get enough of that if you talk to the coaches, talk to the player, and kind of just do a little homework as opposed to just watching him play? Do you feel like you need to see a guy in the high school environment to really get a feel for who he is as a player and as a teammate?
No, I mean, I think, again, recruiting comes in all sorts of forms and fashions. And, we've had guys that, I've watched play 15 times in the summer. And then, you bring them out on a visit and you do the calls, whatever. And then you bring them in the fall. And I've had guys, we've only Zoomed with, I've only seen video on. Obviously not super ideal, but I mean, a guy that's probably penciled in the middle of the order for us this year is from Australia. Reese DeWick, he's going to end up being one of the best hitters in our program history. We never saw that guy. We never saw Reese in person, right? I mean, he's in Australia. And so, I think a lot of it is, you don't want to rely on video, but I think you can tell a lot on video as far as, just strictly talking about hitters. I really think you can tell when a guy can hit. And then I think a really big piece for us is the visit. So Coach Zahani and myself, Coach Maris, our pitching coach, we run visits a little bit different than most colleges. We pretty much do the whole thing. We're with the kid for, between 3 to 6 hours. We give the tour. We give, kind of every kind of talk you can think on campus. We pretty much give, and we're with that kid and his family, from the time he steps on campus to the time he leaves. And I think in those moments, you can learn more about a kid than any other time. You can learn about a kid's desires. You can learn if what the kid wants to do, where he wants to be, how he sees himself. Is he a guy that's going to really come in and work hard and keep his head down and be a grinder? Is he going to be a guy that's all about himself when he comes in? I mean, you can see those things in a lot of different ways. And so, not that, our visit is superior to, other colleges, but I really think it's hard to, you can go out and watch a kid as much as you want. I think it's really hard to know a lot about a kid, talking with him, for a half hour on the phone, and then bringing him on campus, talking to him for 35 to 40 minutes on campus, and then bringing him on, in the fall. I really think you got to get to know the kid, and not that, us spending 6-7 hours with a kid and his family, lets us know his whole life story and everything he's thinking. But I really think it helps us get into, who we want. We've had lots of guys that I've been incredibly excited for, brought him on campus, thought this kid was the real deal, got him on campus, he leaves, and I turn to our head coach, I say, no way we're bringing that guy in. Because just how he acts, how he treats, people in the hallways, how he treats, the financial aid ladies that you introduce him to, how he, just all those sort of things, how he interacts with some of our guys. I think you can see a lot. And then, same is true vice versa. I've had guys that, it's, I've told our head coach, why are we bringing this guy on a visit? The guy leaves, and it's like, this guy's the man. I can't wait for this guy to get here on campus. And you get super pumped up for it. And so, I think for us in the recruiting process, yes, I want to see a kid play in person, 100%. But as far as, some of those off-the-field things, I think the visit is incredibly crucial to the recruiting process and bringing in the right guys. As we've said over this, over the podcast, I mean, you can bring in a guy that he looks the part, he's the real deal, he can hit. He's, if he makes it 4 years for you, he's going to do some really big things on the baseball field, but he tears apart the locker room, and he's not a good fit for you. You're spending just as much time trying to keep him in line or keep him in the culture, than anything. And so I think for us, it's having a guy that has that one tool, a tool that, you can kind of see, bringing him on campus and making sure he fits with what you're doing, fits with you, fits with the coaching staff, fits with the school, fits with the guys that are going to be the upperclassmen leaders when that guy comes in. And then now you've got a good fit. And so that's kind of been the process for us. I don't think there's any, flat rate of black and white, hey, you've got to do this. Like I said, we've had guys that we've seen play a ton, absolute ton over the summer, over the spring, whatever. And then we had 2 transfers. One, our starting third baseman this year, was a guy that transferred in. I saw one round of BP off a video, about a 30-second video with bad quality. But could tell the swing was there. And then talking with him over the phone, bringing him on the visit. I mean, this guy was the real deal. Just talking with him, speaking with him, being around him. And it was a guy that I absolutely wanted, and a guy that's probably, going to be, again, middle-of-the-order guy for us and potentially an all-conference guy for us. And so recruiting, I think, it comes in all shapes and forms, and I think you can get in trouble recruiting, when you pigeonhole yourself to, hey, I got to watch this kid do this, I got to set up this. I mean, it comes in all shapes and forms. We got a guy coming in today. It'll be his first day today, grad transfer, that, we just started talking to, a couple weeks ago. And again, to tell he's the real deal from everybody I talked to is the real deal. And you bring them into your program. And then there's guys that you recruit for months and months and months and months. And all of a sudden you see a couple things that you can tell aren't going to align with what you're doing and gel with your program. And you got to cut that guy loose. And so I think it really recruiting is, a huge subject and something that looks very, very, very different. Even, from guy one on our roster through the last guy on our roster, all those processes, kind of look very, very different from guy to guy.
If there are high school athletes listening to this who have not committed anywhere yet, what kind of advice would you give that a player when they're about to go on a visit? And that could be, things that they ask. It could also be just ways that they act, and how open and honest in themselves they should be. Because I think that you want a player who wants to do their own homework as well, and that wants to, kind of get a feel for the coaching staff as much as you want to get a feel for him, and make sure that you're both going to be getting yourself into a good fit. But if you were talking to a kid today, what would you tell them? Because I think that there are also kids out there that can put on a good face when they're on a visit, and can kind of be on their best behavior, quote unquote, when they're when they're spending a couple hours with coaches or even a shorter visit. A lot of schools don't spend as much time with a recruit as you guys do. But what would you recommend to a kid so that they got the most out of the visit, they got the most out of the experience, if that makes sense, and so the kid walked away with a really good feel, as much as the coaches did, about whether or not that's just what they want to commit to? Because I know that there are a lot of kids out there that just, they're not a good fit for one program or another. So I think it's equally important for a player to walk away from a visit and saying, yes, this is the program that I want to be a part of, or I don't care what they offer me. Like, I don't want to come here. They're not a good fit for me for one reason or another. What would you recommend to a student athlete before they take visits, so they can get the most out of their experience and get, maybe the feel that they, or the depth of the feel that they need to be able to make their own decision?
Yeah, I would say for me it's two things. One, ask as many questions as you possibly can. I was recruited out of high school to my first college, and then I was recruited as a junior in college looking to transfer. And so I went through the recruiting process, twice. And I remember looking back, once I committed to Crown, wishing I had gone through the recruiting process more as a freshman, like I did as a junior in college, where, I got to a campus and I asked the coaches, more questions than you can possibly imagine. As a looking as, to go into college as a freshman, I just kind of wanted to know about this, that, the other. Didn't want to say the wrong thing, didn't want to ask the wrong question. I would say to a guy that's looking, to play college baseball, looking to go through the recruiting process, ask any question that you can possibly think of. Because we, as coaches, we've been asked, probably all of them before anyway. And so you really want to know as much as you possibly can about the program. Ask anything that, that you think is on your mind, that you think is important to you, ask away. And then I would say, make a decision based off of, there's 1,000 things that go into your process of what you're choosing and where you're going to school, major, cost, location, whatever. But if college baseball is really your thing, and you're really devoted to that, and that's going to be one of the main things you could do through your college, journey, pick based off of a coach you like. Right. I'm fully aware. I'm not the guy, and I'm not the coach for every guy out there. I 100% realize that. So you got to find a coach that fits you, because not only are you going to be spending a ton of time with that coach, the program, it filters down from that coach. The program looks based off of that coach. The leaders on the team are somewhat similar to that coach generally. And so really, if you go into a program and you really love a coach, or you don't love the facilities, or you don't love this, that, the other. But you really love the coach compared to another school, go to the school that you really feel in tune with the coach. Don't choose a school based off of facilities. Don't choose a school based off of, colors, closer to your girlfriend, whatever. Choose a school that you really feel like you're going to connect well with that coach. Because you think about how many hours you're at fall ball practices, how many hours you're in meetings, how many hours you're doing grade checks, study halls, actual practices, games, bus trips, hotels, whatever. You're with that coaching staff and those guys in an absorbent amount of time over your 4-year, kind of process in your career. And so you want to be in a program that you align, you see eye to eye with that coach. And obviously, you're not going to know all the intricacies of every coach and how they act in every situation, but you can usually have a pretty good feel. I think one of my biggest regrets, as a guy being recruited, I was being recruited by lots of different schools. Had a school I loved the coach, more than anything. And I still talk to this guy to this day. And I wish I would have gone and played for him. And I chose a different school based off of some other factors. And I never got to play for him. And I really wish I would have. And I really think we would have, gelled better than, me and, my staff at my first school. And so, find a coach that you really think you're going to gel with, that you really can see his vision for it, and then go from there. Obviously, realizing there's 1,000 factors with cost, this, that, the other, but you really got to find a coach that you speak well with, and you think you can be on good terms with, because everything from the program, from what you guys wear on travel trips to what you guys eat, what you guys do, how you guys interact with professors, that all filters down from the coaching staff, whether you want to think it or not, it does. And so you really got to find a staff and a head coach certainly that you think you can see yourself with for 4 years.
I know that there are some people out there that kind of say the opposite, that say that you should pick a school that you would go to if baseball wasn't there. If baseball was taken away from you for whatever reason, that you would stay at that place. That's a school you would pick regardless. But, with what you just said, that the amount of time that you're spending with teammates and coaches, that that's maybe a more important, maybe at least an equally important factor. How would you? You're a guy that's gone to 2 different schools, and now you're recruiting kids, and obviously you want to recruit kids that are going to last 4 years in your program, that are going to enjoy themselves and have a good experience. How would you rank, if you could, Brooks, just I guess what some of the most important factors are there, and whether or not you would tell a kid, if this campus doesn't work for you, no matter how much you gel with the team and the coaches, this probably isn't a good fit? Or do you think that if a player comes and feels very at home, if he comes on a visit, feels very at home with the guys that are on the roster currently, feels very at home with the coaches, that the school will end up working for him because he's in a good environment? Just kind of curious how you have that conversation. And again, just trying to guide and direct kids that might be listening to this that they're not in college yet, or high school coaches that are trying to help their players to commit to the right place. Because I think as a high school coach, if you're doing your job and helping your guys get to the next level, then you should also be able to give them some advice, as far as when they're taking visits, what they should be doing and looking for when they come back from visits, like how exactly they evaluate that school that they just visited. So just curious your thoughts, again, with your experiences, about how much the school itself, minus baseball, the size of the school, the environment, whether it's urban or rural or whatever, obviously the school has to have the major that you're interested in, but class sizes and how well regarded academically it is, or just whatever the situation is. How much do you think those things are a factor compared to a baseball player finding a good fit on the baseball team, because that's who you're going to be spending most of your time with?
Yeah, I'd say it's a little bit of a two-prong, approach for us, where again, like you said, the major and the academic pieces is got to come number one. We don't offer engineering. I don't want to bring a kid in that is, his life goal is to be an engineer. We convince him to come in and he's going to be a business major. All of a sudden he graduates, 4 years later, and he resents for life that he wasn't, an engineer. Or, he comes here for 2 years and all of a sudden, hey, I want to be an engineer, and leaves. You got to have the academic fit for you, and you got to have what a kid is looking for, kind of in that area. And I think I tell guys that, number one, go to a place where you feel like you can get to where you want to be after baseball. Baseball ends for everybody at some point, whether that's at the end of your 4 years at college or whether that's 20 years down the road. Baseball is going to end for you. Very few guys, make it past that 4 years of college baseball. So find a spot where you think you can move on from there and get to where you want to be outside of baseball. But then I think for us, Coach Tahani, myself, Coach Maris, we are baseball guys. And I think that's, you recruit who you are similar to. And so being the recruiting coordinator, I recruit guys that, baseball is, their life. I can tell you right now, when I was being recruited, I couldn't care less about location. I couldn't care less about class size. I wanted to go to the best fit for me baseball-wise. I wanted the best fit as a baseball player. And like you said, some people say that, go to a school where you want to be, unless you were, if you weren't playing baseball, you still want to be there. I don't want to say I couldn't disagree with that more, but, the fact of it is, in the college athletic world, in the college baseball world, in my eyes, I would say 95% of our guys are here for the number one reason, are here for baseball. And then, the rest of it kind of, they mold to the school, not vice versa. And so, it's different from guy to guy, 100%. But I would say, like I said, I think 95 to 99% of our guys would not be at Crown College, if it wasn't for the baseball aspect of it. And so, but that's us. We recruit guys that, baseball is their life. I don't want a guy that, for example, that wants to play two sports in college, or has other interests, whatever. I want a guy that's a baseball guy, that this is their life, because this is our life. As coaches, we want to win games, more than anything. And so we want to bring in guys that they are, they're baseball junkies, that this is their life, this is what they want to do. And they come in and they realize, hey, I've got two jobs when I get here. I've got succeed in the classroom, do well academically, and make baseball a number one priority. I tell guys all the time, and I got this from Ernie May, who was a longtime college coach. He told me on my visit, when I was being recruited in high school, hey, if you really like baseball, this isn't the spot for you. You got to really love baseball to be here, to succeed here. And so I think a lot of schools, a lot of colleges, you can really like baseball and you can do well there and you can succeed there. Not really the case here. You got to really love baseball. Baseball's got to be your life for you to kind of gel, with our coaching staff, with Coach Sahani, Coach myself, Coach Maris, and kind of our upperclassmen, because baseball is 100% our lives. And so I think it really looks different, from program to program, but that's how we approach it. You got to have where you want to be after college. You got to have that, kind of mapped out in your mind and narrow down schools from there. And then I really think, most college athletes are at that school for their program, not vice versa.
I love that, and that's how I always felt also, honestly. I never quite understood the people who would say that you should go to a school where you go anyway. I think you don't want to go somewhere where you're going to be miserable. I think if there are certain kids out there that want certain things. The last place that I was Morehead State in Kentucky, and it was a little town in the hills of Kentucky, and there were certain guys I think that would have been a lot less happy there than others, but especially guys that like to hunt and fish and like to be outdoors, like it was a great place for them. And I'd tell them that, like the first time I called a guy, I would kind of tell him what campus is like and say, look, if you really have your heart set on going to a school, in a big city, or you're just, that's the kind of person you are, then, if that's kind of how you grew up and that's where you want to be, then maybe this might not be a great fit. But then obviously you tell them about the baseball program and this is what we have going here. And it's, it's 4 years of your life where we're going to win a lot of games. You're going to have a lot of success. You're really going to have a lot of fun here. And I think we ended up having a really good mixture of guys really from all over the country that kind of gelled together with some of those teams that we had there. But no, I agree with you that I think there have to be some other factors involved for sure. Starting with the major and the academics, because like you said, baseball is going to end at some point. And I think you want to prepare your guys for success after baseball, after college is over. And I think that there have to be some other certain factors involved in a way. But also if you get guys that are too focused on one thing or another, then sometimes that just wasn't the right fit, especially at a mid-major Division I. If you want a guy who is all about the Power 5 or is all about going to a campus with 30,000 kids and, sometimes those guys end up having success, but sometimes to me it was like you're kind of focused on the wrong things here, man, because I think we're going to win a lot. We're going to develop guys. We're going to beat a bunch of those Power 5 schools throughout the year. And if you really need that sort of high profile, then, this isn't the right fit for several different reasons. First of all, because we're not that high profile, but second of all, maybe because your priorities aren't exactly aligned with what ours are. And anyway, I think to me, if you're honest back and forth, if the player is honest and the coaches are honest, you end up figuring out what's going to be a good fit and what's not. Brooks, I'd like to just ask the last question, just to kind of wrap things up. I'd like to just kind of ask you what your future looks like. You're a young guy. I've been coaching for, just a couple of years, but I think you have a really mature approach to things, and somehow or another, whether it was your family or the coaches you've had or just the experiences you've had, I think you're ahead of a lot of other people as far as just your understanding of certain things and kind of just a mature approach to recruiting, to coaching, a mature outlook on things, especially, coaching former teammates and things along those lines that we've talked about here. But I'm interested to get your perspective, your point of view on what your future looks like. And I'm not trying to ask you to leave Crown College, today or tomorrow, but, do you like the recruiting side of things and want to continue to be a recruiting coordinator and move up the ladder in that regard? Do you have, would you like to be a head coach as soon as you can? Do you want to, whatever it is, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but just curious what the future looks like for you and where you think your next move or two could go, or even if it's in pro ball or whatever. Just curious what your path might look like in the future.
Yeah, I would say, as of today, my number one goal is, to be a head coach at the college level, be that, Division I head coach. That's kind of, the goal. But, I think you also have to, like you said, have your feet kind of grounded where you are. When I graduated college, that was, my number one thing. How can I be how can I get to the Division I level as fast as I possibly can? And, as I've gone through this being my third year as a college coach, things have looked different. I got offered a Division I assistant job this fall, and I turned it down to stay here because really I felt like this is where I'm called to be for this season. We've got a very special group of guys this year, a lot of upperclassmen, a lot of guys that I've kind of seen transition through, and thought this was going to be the best opportunity for me is to be at Crown College for this spring. And so I think it really you never know what life's going to throw you. I certainly graduating college. We didn't have an assistant. It was just our head coach on campus. We didn't have an assistant coach when I graduated as a senior. And I remember at graduation, our head coach, Coach Sahani, joking with me and like, hey, what do you think about coming back and coaching, Crown? And I was like, yeah, right. I mean, you guys don't even have an assistant position. Had my bags packed to go and coach at a Division II school on the East Coast, and then got the call, hey, we're going to have an assistant job, available. Would you take it? And all of a sudden, instead of going, to the East Coast, I'm back at Crown, and the rest is kind of history. And if you'd have told me, hey, you're going to turn down a Division I job, as assistant to stay at Crown, 3-4 years ago, I said, yeah, right. You just kind of never know where life takes you, what it has in store for you. I do want to be a head coach, sooner than later, certainly. I want to be at the Division I level. I want to be a head coach at the Division I level. I'm pretty open about that. I'm pretty open about it with, our head coach, Coach Sahani, and, our admin here at Crown. But, also with the eyes of, you got to be focused on what you're doing. The big-time jobs and big-time accomplishments don't come, if you're only focused, kind of outward. You got to do your work. You got to show up every single day, grind away at what you got in front of you, the season you have in front of you as a baseball coach and the guys you have in your clubhouse, in your locker room, and then the rest is going to come. And so very confident that, the head coaching gig is going to, going to happen for me at some point. But just incredibly excited for this year, 2022 season for the, for us and the Storm and kind of all the guys we've got coming back as grad guys. And so, excited for myself, for my future, but, even more excited for kind of the team we have here at Crown and kind of what we're building at Crown. And when other jobs and opportunities come about, excited for those opportunities in the future too.
That's really great. This is Brooks Repking, everybody. He's currently the associate head coach and recruiting coordinator at Crown College in Minnesota. Brooks, this has been a really great podcast. I've enjoyed it a lot. It's, I know you're a really young guy, but talking to you and having pretty lengthy discussion here with you. It doesn't feel like I'm talking to a guy who's only been coaching in college for a couple years, and I hope you'll take that as much of a compliment as I mean it to be. And but I really appreciate your time. I think that you've got some really good things going there at Crown. I expect that that your team will continue to kind of rewrite the record books there over the next for however long you're there, and no doubt that some really bright things are going to happen in your future as well, as long as you just remain as humble as you are, and just kind of have your have your nose to the grindstone, and just keep on working and doing what you're doing now. I think you've got a really bright future ahead of you. But I certainly want to thank you for your time on the podcast. It's been really, really enjoyable, and hopefully this isn't the last time that we have you. I usually like to say something at the end of the podcast. Just I'd love to have guys be a part of a future part of Figured Out Baseball. For people that have not visited the website at figuredoutbaseball.com, we have hundreds and hundreds of free videos and podcasts. It's a totally free platform. All of our podcasts and videos are with people like Coach Repking, who are currently at the college or pro level. I think it's a very unique website and platform for those reasons. And we Figured Out Baseball is what it is because of really good people like you and people that want to give back to the baseball community, and people who kind of, I think, have their heads on straight and just want to help in any way that they can. So I certainly appreciate your time on this podcast, but I also hope it's not the last we hear from you.
No, I really appreciate the time, and look forward to hopefully speaking again with you guys, here, and I really appreciate the time and excited for your guys' future.